We have to remain on offense against terrorism. And we have to remain on offense to preserve, protect, and expand our growth economy. We have got to unite in this election. Because if we don't unite, and we don't find a way of uniting around broad principles that will appeal to a large segment of this country, if we can't figure that out, we're going to lose this election.
Okay, there's Rudy Giuliani today, who was explaining once again his stance on abortion as he asked how important that is and how important differences are on that compared to other key issues, as he talked about how Republicans can win the next election. Now, some analytical observations from Fred Barnes, executive editor of the Weekly Standard, Nina Easton, Washington bureau chief of Fortune magazine, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer, Fox News contributors all. So, did Rudy Giuliani clarify his position today, or just suggest that it was not the be-all and end-all of ways voters should evaluate whether or not they support him?
Well, he certainly did the second by emphasizing how good he is on the other stuff and by showing himself to be very articulate and easy with those issues. He tried on abortion. As you know, I've tried to explain his position here now twice, and once in writing. I could be the only person in America who understands his position on abortion, including Rudy Giuliani. But I'm not going to do it a third time. All I'm going to say is this appears to be, this argument over his position on abortion is, I think, a distraction because, in fact, in our country, the judges have taken over abortion. It's not like in Western Europe where it's done by the people. And the only relevant question for a president is what kind of judge are you going to appoint? He's told us. He says he will promise to appoint either someone like Alito or Roberts, and you can't do any better than that. You can't guarantee that you're going to have somebody who'll overturn Roe v. Wade. Look, our most revered conservative President Reagan appointed 3 justices, 2 of whom, O'Connor and Kennedy, wrote the Casey decision upholding Roe. So you never know. But given the constraints in our system on what a conservative president can do on abortion, why would he be unacceptable for any reason?
Nina, I mean, so Charles is suggesting this is a distraction, really, and that is, in essence, what Rudy Giuliani is arguing. Right. That, look, you know where I feel. If we differ, fine, but that is not the most important evaluation you can make when you decide who to vote for.
Right. And first of all, I need to make my disclaimer that my husband works for the McCain campaign. But Charles's point, I think it's a fine intellectual nuance. But this is presidential politics here, Charles. Yeah, so, and I think what this reminded me, this whole week has kind of reminded me of Hillary Clinton's safe, legal, and rare moment, where she stood up to the base and she said, the base of her party, and said, look, we can't go around and act like abortion is something we like. You know, we want it safe, we want it legal, but really we want it rare, and let's see how we can reduce the number of abortions. Rudy Giuliani's doing the same thing to his base, and I think on one level it's an interesting strategy on his campaign's part. Keep in mind, we haven't really had a presidential election nomination contest over the abortion issue since 2000. Since 2004, we already had a Republican candidate. So is abortion really the defining element that it was in 2000? They're betting not, because they're hoping for California, New Jersey, these more liberal states coming up front. And their bet is that abortion won't matter as much as these other big issues.
Fred?
Yeah, probably won't. But I think it's a measure of the problem that Rudy Giuliani has created for himself, that he needs one of America's most preeminent columnists to interpret for him, namely Charles Krauthammer. And Charles does a much better job than Giuliani has done. And I agree that if there's a huge...
You're just setting me up.
No, I'm not, really. I agree that if there's a debate that goes on for a long time about abortion in the Republican presidential race, that is not helpful. Right. And I do think that Giuliani helped himself today, because I think he did clarify his position. And what he said was, basically, I agree with the majority of Americans who think there should be a legal right to an abortion, but we need to have lots of limitations and restrictions. He didn't elaborate what those ones were, except for the ban on partial birth abortion. So we'll see how his next test is the Tuesday presidential debate in South Carolina. If he can get through that, maybe the issue will die.
Well, he also needed to get this off the table before that debate, so that wasn't the only issue people paid attention to. So.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right, next on